Welcome to Wine Road, the wine, when, and where of Northern Sonoma County. I'm your host, Marcy Gordon, with Beth Costa, Executive Director of the Wine Road.
Thanks to Ron Rubin, we're able to keep our podcast rolling along. The financial support of River Road Family Vineyards and Winery allows us to keep recording, keep sipping wine, and keep sharing stories with our listeners. Check out their website at riverroadvineyards.com and explore their Chardonnay, as well as a finely crafted Pinot Noir from the Russian River Valley. That's riverroadvineyards.com. And hey, thanks, Ron, for allowing us to make this show happen.
Welcome to episode 214. Today our guest is Jack Florence, and he's here to talk about his new book, Dare to Dream, as well as his history in the Valley and all that we know as Rockpile that he established. Welcome, Jack. We're glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Although I'm going to have to tell you right out of the gate, Jack did not bring a bottle of wine for us. And so I don't know. I think he's in big trouble.
I'm a deadbeat. That's what they are.
That's what the payment.
I think we'll give him a pass.
Yeah, well,
I can
we'll
come
let it
back.
Go. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Now that I know how to get here, I can come back.
Yeah.
Well, he's already gone through the gauntlet of trying to find the studios, so...
So without the wine, tell us the wine that you were going to bring is Florence Vineyard or Florence Winery. Tell us about it.
Yes, I can tell you a little bit about it, and I'll show you some of the awards. The wine I was going to bring and had set up to bring here was Petite Souris. And Petite Souris is my favorite varietal.
Oh, wow.
And it is also my favorite wine to bring because it's from Rockpile. And on top of that, it's my son's wine made from grapes that he has grown on his vineyard up there. So he has had an amazing story of success with that wine. It was the 2020 Petite Souris from Rockpile.
Mm-hmm.
That was the wine.
Mm-hmm.
And it won this was his first release. He got a double gold from the Sonoma County Harvest Fair. He got a double gold from the North Coast Wine Challenge. And he got a gold medal from the Los Angeles Invitational.
Wow.
So he's telling us all these things that we could have tasted.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And what's more is that there's only 2 bottles left.
Oh, my gosh.
So we could have finished them.
Truly.
And I was also going to bring a Zin. And he makes 2 wines. And I was going to bring a Zin to taste. And his Zin was the 2021. He makes a lot more Zin than he does Pet. But his 2021 Rockpile Reserve, the Los Angeles Invitational, 99 points. The North Coast Wine Challenge, 96 points. Monterey International, gold wine. The San Diego International, a gold winner. The Sunset International Wine Competition, a double gold.
Boy.
So the wines that are coming off his vineyard are absolutely superb. And
Zinfandel.
I'm sorry we can't get to taste it.
That's okay.
We'll forgive you.
Oh, okay, well,
I will, but I don't know about Beth.
Yeah. I'm going to remember for a while, but I'll forgive you.
let me leave it with you that if anybody of the listeners wants to contact Jack, they're welcome to contact him at his email address, jflorencejr@mac.com.
Okay, that's great.
Well, there's nothing more famous than a Rockpile Zin.
Right. So
Absolutely.
your love for Dry Creek Valley and particularly the Rockpile AVA shows through really in everything that you talk about. But I believe you were born on the East Coast.
Yes.
So how did your love for this area and come to be?
My very first job out of college, I'm trained a nuclear engineer. And my first job was with a company in Los Angeles named AI. And before you say artificial intelligence, that's not right.
It was before that, yeah.
It was Atomics International.
Wow.
And so we lived in this is Canoga Park, the outskirts of L.A. And what was then, this was in the 1957, and it was still, the valley was still citrus groves.
Mm-hmm.
And it was changing rapidly to houses. But we were just amazed and so impressed by the citrus. And anybody who knows what a citrus plant smells like, what the fragrance is,
It's beautiful.
just
Yeah.
the most beautiful
Yeah.
smell of those. Yes. So anyhow, we had decided, we were down there for 15 years, and we decided that we were going to retire, or when we retired, we would retire to a citrus grove. And I spent some time up in Visalia looking the place over to see where we might buy a place. And this is after a couple of years now of searching and thinking about it, our minds were made up. And there was an article in the LA Times and it was a big article, and it was written by Andy Beckstoffer.
Oh, wow.
Andy, of course, you folks, I
Yeah.
guess, know is from Napa. And so Andy extolled the virtues of the great life growing wine grapes. And I said to Fran, I said, we can't go ahead on citrus until we at least check this out.
Good article.
We owe that much to ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I made an overnight trip up here. I've never been here before. And as you can well imagine, it was love at first sight.
Yeah.
And so citrus went by the wayside. And from that moment on, it was wine grapes.
Wow.
So that's how we kind of got started.
That's a great story. And so but then you went from, nuclear engineering to possibly retiring in wine country. And how did you become interested then in farming and growing grapes?
It was, I guess I'd say to you, it was kind of like in my blood. I would say, I've talked to people, I've talked to you folks about the fact that I was a brand new grower. I'd
Right.
never done that before. And I did a little research. Actually, it's not that hard. I've got it done already in home. But the Florence family came from New York City. And here we have the records. They were in the hotel business. And the first hotel was built in 1843. And they had a second hotel, and it was closed in like 1909. But the whole point is my grandfather was a pharmacist. And so there was no farmers there, none whatsoever, obviously. My mother's side comes from Ireland, and they came into New York City in 1841, I guess it was, which was at the height of the potato famine in Ireland. They landed in New York, made it as far as Brooklyn, and stayed there. And that family became a family of shopkeepers and of school teachers. So the whole point I'm making here is that there was no inkling of me ever becoming a farmer.
Right.
No family precedent.
No.
No. It turns out, though, I'll point out my son, who went to Davis and graduated in plant science or whatever it was, and he has done nothing his entire life but farm.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, he's been farming grapes.
Yeah.
So that's the story about how we got into the grapes.
And so I think it was you and possibly your son who were so instrumental in the formation of the Rockpile AVA, as opposed to just being part of Dry Creek Valley.
That is another story. Jack was instrumental, but it's actually kind of like a family thing. He was selling grapes to Carol Shelton and to Rosenblum in Alameda. And they were making outstanding wines from Jack's grapes. And I remember saying to Jack that everybody was raving about his wine. We just had, I think it was like around the Christmas holidays. And I said, this wine deserves to have its own AVA. Now, this is in the days when the AVA was still kind of in its infancy.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
That's the beginning.
So I did what I thought was the thing to do. I called an attorney and said, I need to get some lawyer to help me write up this AVA. And he said, you don't need a lawyer. You can do it yourself. So I did. And I brought with me a timeline. I'll leave it with you. It's important for me to state to you guys that in the early days, and we could spend the whole show on this, so I'm not going to do that. In the early days, the AVAs were not doing what BATF had in mind. The key to the AVA is uniqueness.
Right.
And when you have when you have an AVA the size of Dry Creek or Alexander Valley, they are by no means unique. I mean, they grow white grapes and red grapes, and they grow them very well in very good areas. They probably should be 2 AVAs. So anyhow, they all of the early AVAs were oversized, and Rockpile was perfect. It is an extension of Dry Creek, actually, and it's right up there by Lake Sonoma.
Mm-hmm.
Jack bought his ranch up there. It's on the ridge. It forms the western side of Lake Sonoma. And a few of the unique things about Rockpile, there are no white grapes grown on Rockpile. It must be the only appellation that has no white grapes. Mm-hmm. So there is no white wine coming from Rockpile. There are no wineries on Rockpile. This makes it extremely unique and exactly what BATF was after. So we went and we pursued it.
Rockpile is an anomaly. It is so specific. It's what a true AVA should be.
Yes. Rockpile, if you will, defines an AVA. And I'm encouraging the folks up there. There's only half a dozen or so growers in the whole AVA. It's 14,000 acres. But I'm encouraging them to really push hard to give the AVA its reputation, to give it the publicity that it needs. And my goal would be, and if I was still living there, it most certainly would be, to make Rockpile synonymous with Zinfandel.
Absolutely.
And exactly the same way that Cabernet is synonymous with Bordeaux.
I think Zinfandel, I think Rockpile.
Right.
Even though Dry Creek is known for Zinfandel, I always think that's like, the pinnacle is Rockpile.
That's interesting that you say that. I agree with that 100%. But by the same token, Dry Creek has the potential. They can grow very, very super Zins in the right area. You would never grow Zin in Dry Creek down next to Healdsburg.
Right.
Just ain't too cold.
Right. And that just shows you how big the AVA is.
And that's what's kind of, if you will, in a sense, holding back Dry Creek and all the others, the other AVAs, that they're just too big. And the story in the book details that, because BATF made a mistake when they requested for AVAs, and they spent 20 years trying to correct that mistake, and they're still working on it.
Gosh, imagine, though, if you really made it so specific, you'd have hundreds of AVAs.
That's true.
Within Sonoma County. I mean, like Alexander Valley, they do grow Sauvignon Blanc, they grow Cabernets, so you're thinking that each region should be specific to that.
It would have to be if you're going to stay true to the AVA concept. So one of the solutions is to not have the AVA.
Yeah.
That would do it. One interesting point that we're discussing here is Pinot Noir. Now, you ladies are probably too young to remember when Pinot...
He's buttering us
You're
up.
trying to get points on this. All right. We forgive you for not bringing the wine.
Exactly.
But I remember distinctly, we lived in Dry Creek at the time. The winemakers could not make a decent Pinot, and nobody really knew why. We got all kinds of excuses for it. But the decision was, well, they just haven't gotten used to the grape yet, something of that nature.
Right.
So and the correction was simply this. Pinot are a red grape, and they were planted in the warm areas because they're a red grape.
Right.
They didn't belong in those red grape warm areas. They belong where they are now in
Russian River.
Russian River.
Cooler climate.
Right.
Yeah.
So that shows the importance, of understanding the AVAs and what they mean.
Now people are experimenting with grapes that grow better in a warming climate as our climate gets warmer.
Yeah.
So it's more Italian varietals, more types of grapes, varieties that will be heat resistant. One thing I wanted to mention is we did not tell the title of your new book where you talk about this. The book is called Dare to Dream, A Life Among the Vines. And you go deeper into what you're talking about now in the book. Is that correct?
The book had several start points. The starting point really was when we were still living in Dry Creek, and I wanted to write about the AVAs. Now, the AVAs were official in 1983, and I wrote all about the AVAs just as much as we have been talking about them. Mm-hmm. And I realized I didn't want to lose the history because the history is very interesting. 2 very major big hearings in San Francisco. There was a lot of conversation with the names that you would recognize in the wine business, calling each other names and so on.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I like that. A lot of conversation.
A lot of controversy.
So it was a very, very turbulent time. So the book kind of focuses on the period 75 to 1990. And there's an enormous number of changes at that time. For example, in the wineries, they developed the balloon press. And that changed the business entirely. They can make smooth, fruitful wines. And that just changed the quality of wines just overnight. The growers in 1976, if you were driving among the vineyards, they were all head pruned. The old way of doing it in Italy 200 years ago. You drive down those same roads in 1990, and all the vineyards would be on wire.
Right.
They'd be trellised, totally different. The reason for that was that we realized that the vines, the berries themselves, needed sun on them, but not too much.
Right. Just right.
It's a delicate balance.
So it makes growing wine grapes very ticklish, and it also makes it very, very important that the grower grow the right grape in the right area.
Right.
And bottom line to that over and over again. And so in any event, and I was preparing for this, but I think that the key word, if you want to have a key word for Dare to Dream, is revolution. In order to have a revolution, you have to have a change of heart, a change of mind, a change of understanding. It has to come from within, okay? And it was that change that occurred over the 25 years where the industry recognized for the first time, I've been giving lip service to this for a couple hundred years, but for the first time they realized the importance of the grape. And again, what we used to, as growers, we used to say that great wine is 75% or 95% from the grower and 5% of the winemaker staying away. and so we all laughed about it, and everybody, we kind of knew on the edges that this
was true.
very, very, very important. But now the industry realizes that there's three parts makes that wine. That's the winemaker, the wine grower, and the grape. In 1976, the industry was pretty much the same as it was in 83, whenever it was, that Father Sarah planted the grapes in San Diego. Not really many changes, obviously some, but now, in that 25-year period, we've seen a complete and total change.
I liked also when I read one of the excerpts from the book is the credit that you're giving to growers and how, more and more we need to pay attention to who the growers are and what the growers are saying, because they are the ones that are out in the vineyards, which goes back to planting the right grapes, managing them correctly. I mean, that is the bottom line. That is how the wine turns out so great.
Changed mostly with Passport. Passport came about in 1989.
So Passport is a well-known wine industry event that happens in Dry Creek Valley.
Passport to Dry Creek Valley, yes. During the first Passport, like so many of the growers, I was on schedule to give a tour. And it was amazing to me how many people, strangers obviously, came up to me and said, "It's great to meet a grower." I said, "I've met all kinds of winemakers, but now I've met a grower."
Right.
And it was a sign of the change, That's the principal subject of this book.
Well, and I think people that's a feeling that has grown stronger and stronger through all the events that the Wine Road puts on. I think like with our big barrel tasting event, it's the same thing. People want to come and they want to meet. They appreciate if they get a chance to meet the growers because they understand that that's where it all starts. And I think they're getting the credit due finally. So you have actually written 2 books prior. So this book is called Dare to Dream, A Life Among the Vines. But you have also written A Noble Heritage, and that was just about Dry Creek Valley, isn't it?
A Noble Heritage, there's an interesting beginning to that book. First of all, the Wine Groves of Dry Creek was formed in, I think it was 1989. And so the first meeting of the board, I was on the board, and the first meeting of the board, we all decided what kind of subject we wanted to take for ourselves, what kind of committees we wanted to lead. And I jumped up and said, I want history.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting because I have never had a history class. I've never been to a college class in history ever. I'm strictly a technician. But I want to do history. And at the time, the oral histories were just coming into vogue. And the winery at Berkeley had a collection of oral histories. Around me, I'm living in Dry Creek, seeing all these old guys are all dying.
Yeah.
Now was the time to get them.
Get them now, right.
So I announced to the public in Dry Creek that we had a history committee and what we were going to do. And I said, our first meeting will be next Monday night, whenever it was. And I had a crowd showed up. Oh my gosh. Everybody was enthused, and so they're ready to go. So they were all newbies like me. So none of us knew what we were doing. And so I said, okay, we're going to spend a couple of weeks getting to know what we're doing. So we met with people like Hannah Claiborne. Do you know Hannah Claiborne?
No, I know the name.
Hannah was the curator of the Hillsburg Museum. And she's still around. She's written some great stuff about the history of this local area. So we visited with Hannah. We talked to Millie Howie.
I know Millie. The Wine Road is here because of Millie. Absolutely.
Yes. I remember having a breakfast at Millie's house on Super Bowl Sunday. I don't remember what year it was. Watch my watch.
Got the games kick off.
But there was a lot of interest in the oral histories. And so finally, after, 2 or 3 weeks of prepping my little group, I said, okay, our next meeting, we're going to select subjects, and we're also going to then assign people to do the interviews. So the next meeting, guess what happened?
Nobody's there.
Nobody showed up.
Yeah, I've been in that boat many times.
And I sat there and said, where was my help?
Yes, I had help.
So I have to honestly tell you, I was, in fact, really depressed.
Well, yeah, it's
I
disappointing.
mean, I had my heart and soul into this.
Yes.
And I thought I had a bunch of successful people. I mean, people who were going to make the whole thing a success. And I went back to the board with my head between my legs. And I said, I failed. I said, but I can do one thing, and I know I can rely on the people involved, and as I can write the history.
Right.
And I only have to depend upon myself showing up.
Well, there was a bonus.
And so I did. And one of the fascinating things about that was in those days, the early 90s, all of us in the wine business thought we were pioneers. We're talking now dry creek.
Right.
And the only other winery of any note, if you will, was Italian Swiss Colony.
Right.
And we all looked down our noses on Italian Swiss Colony. But we thought that we were pioneers and just doing something for the first time. So my history revealed that was totally wrong, that Dry Creek was second only to Sonoma Valley in production of wine. And let's see, that would have been around 1920, something in that area when Prohibition came. And at that time, it had been like 100 years since the production in 1990 was equal to what they were doing back in 1919.
Wow.
So that was something we didn't know. It was brand new.
Right.
Yeah.
So you followed up that book with a book called Legacy of a Village, the Italian Swiss Colony and the People of Asti. I can remember as a kid myself stopping with my grandmother at Italian Swiss Colony. It was amazing. I mean, they had their own little post office box. They had everything. It was the biggest draw in the state of California at one time. I mean, like
Yes.
Disneyland. It's incredible.
It was incredible, and I go into this in some detail. It was formed in 1881, and we can skip over a few years to, I guess it was late 1889, something like that, when they had a big harvest coming up, and they knew they were going to have, they needed more storage capacity, so they built a tank. Have you heard this story?
No.
They dug a big hole. You know, this is close to harvest. There's no time to order such a big tank. It didn't exist, I guess, if they wanted to order it. So they dug a deep hole, and they made a concrete tank out of it.
Yeah.
It was rectangular, it wasn't
Right.
circular.
Right.
And it was something like it held 500,000 gallons of wine.
Oh,
my
my
gosh.
Lord.
And as I said, it was in the dirt. And to get into the tank, you would have to walk down. There's a circular staircase and so on. And the chairman of Asti, of ISC at the time, was Andrea Sabarbaro. And so he was from San Francisco, a fairly wealthy guy by this time. And he invited all of his wealthy friends from San Francisco up to Asti for a party to celebrate the new tank. And what they did, folks, you can just have to use your own imagination. They had a dance inside the tank
Oh, my God.
with the band.
Oh, my gosh.
And I don't know what the music was like in 1890, but it was probably loud. And I can't imagine the acoustics, what they would have done.
Oh, my gosh.
And that tank, of course, is still there,
I imagine.
but it's not being used. It's used
Yeah.
now for emergency water.
Right.
Wow, interesting.
There is a tunnel that leads from the wall of the tank out into a room in the processing room.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the pleasure of being taken up that tunnel. And you got to kind of go not hands and knees, but head bent over.
Crouch
and so on.
down.
And it's just rough stone. It's not polished or anything. And you can come right up to the old valve that was right there that held
Oh,
the
my gosh.
wine inside the tank.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you're right, it's fascinating.
It's beautiful. I mean, the history is great. There's a little chapel there. People get married up at Asti.
Yeah.
At one point, Chateau Souverain had taken over the property, and they were trying to reopen a taste room there. I mean, the buildings there are beautiful, and it's definitely, huge wine history for
Huge
Sonoma
piece of
County.
history. Yeah.
Definitely.
I can tell you a few things about what the colony did to kind of amplify, Beth, your point. In 1990, the colony was the first winery, including Gallo, to advertise on TV nationwide.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
I remember that.
everybody remembers who was the little old winemaker.
Oh,
Me?
yeah, that's
It
right.
was Charlie. The name of the guy who played the little old winemaker. I
That's in the
remember him.
book, but
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
have it here.
Yeah,
with me,
yeah.
yes. And then just to go on further, that was 1990. In 1992 was the World's Fair in Seattle. And America had not yet become a nation of flyers. We were still driving cars. And so most of the visitors, or many of the visitors to the World's Fair, started in San Francisco. And, of course, they drove right past Asti on the old Redwood Highway. And many of the cars stopped by. I guess the
Yes.
kids were just saying, hey, Daddy, are we there yet? It's time.
Right.
And so they pulled in. Now, in that year, 400,000 people visited the winery.
That's incredible.
That's insane.
328,000 went on the winery tours. That's by actual count. And
Can you imagine?
With my grandmother, I was probably only 10 years old. I lived in Eureka and she lived in San Francisco, and she was driving me to her house for the summer, and we stopped at Asti and did a tour. I can remember taking pictures with the little, you could put your head through the little costumed girl, so
Right.
little
Yep.
Italians. I remember the whole thing so well. Yeah.
that kind of tickles me. The tasting room that year poured 5,000 gallons of wine in little glass at a time.
Little tiny.
Wow.
And at the time, I did some checking around. It was a little bit hard to get some data, but I figured out that the most active tasting room in all of Sonoma County in that year did maybe 3,000 gallons. And this was 5,000 gallons.
My goodness. The heyday of wine tourism.
It was.
Yeah. And do you remember as you drove down the road from the highway to the tasting room, the parking lot, you could look off to your left and see a little church.
Oh, yeah.
And the visitors all thought that church should have a rounded ceiling roof. And they all thought it was made out of a wine barrel.
No.
And, of course, it wasn't. That church is still there. It's Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And the ceiling of that church is made from wine staves.
Oh, wow.
There's not a knot hole in that ceiling.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating story.
It's really worth driving up to check it out. I do want people to know that in our show notes, we don't have a firm date for when the book will absolutely, for sure, be available to order online, but we will update the link as it is available. It looks like it probably will be in February for the new book. So we're kind of shooting for that. And when it's ready, we will have a link in there for you to order it. We're going to put links to Jack's first 2 books as well, because I think everyone should know about Italian Swiss Colony. If you're a wine lover, you want to know about Italian Swiss Colony. So
What
you
a
might want
history.
to check that book out also. And we'll put links to Florence Vineyards and to your son's wines. And I think that's kind of it. Anything else that you want to tell them?
No, the Asti book is out of print, of course, but you can go on Amazon and they have
Amazon will have it.
they have copies.
They have everything.
And there are 2 reviews, both are 5-star reviews.
There you go.
Excellent.
Okay, so I think that's kind of it. Before we wrap up, I do want to take one more episode to thank Sonoma Magazine for having been our presenting media sponsor for our recent Wine and Food Affair event that just happened. And I want to mention that tickets are now on sale for Winter Wineland, which is January 18th and 19th. And actually, some of the wineries are extending their event special to that Monday, January 20th, because it is a 3-day weekend. So if you want to take advantage of that. So you can check the website to see what else is happening on Friday night as well of that weekend, because a few wineries offer some little Friday night happy hours or sort of meet the winemaker situations. I think that's it.
All
Thank you
right.
so much for listening,
Thank
Jack.
you, Jack.
It was great to have you.
Really.
Thank you very much for having me.
It was fun.
We'll see you on the wine road.
Thank you.